Alright, so what is up? Let's get started with machine learning here. In this video, I want to just explain how to properly set yourself up to use machine learning to solve problems. I would like to give some prerequisites about what kind of hardware you should be using. I'll suggest software to use that is the software I use, and I will leave it at that. Just want to make sure that everyone watching this has these basic requirements down and is able to actually run the code and the programs that are available. All right, so prerequisites. Obviously, you need a computer. You're gonna have a lot easier time with a dedicated computer that you solely use for machine learning, because a lot of the models that you may train on or query for results will demand all of the computing capabilities of your device. For an operating system, I use Linux. Linux is preferred for me because Linux is set up to work really well with Python, C, PyTorch, just general programming. Right off the top, permissions. The file permission system on Linux is extremely straightforward. Windows, there are folders in Windows that you do not have access to. That does not exist in Linux. You can access whatever the hell you want in Linux. Mac OS also has some safety features that prevent you from doing certain things. And when you're running these models and these models are trying to extract files from certain locations and trying to save files in certain areas and are working with a whole bunch of other programs, permissions get in the way. Text editor or IDE, I use VS Code. Big VS Code guy. I really like VS Code for its lack of cost, its community support, and the amount of extensions and features that you can add on to it. There's also Vim. You could use Vim or Nano. Those also have good extensions and additional features, but they're harder to use. And at this point, it's not worth the time to figure out how to make those editors work for you unless you are truly invested in it. If you don't care, I would stick with VS Code or maybe even Notepad++. All right. And for hardware, you want a 500 gigabyte hard drive at the minimum. When you train models, you are taking a large collection of data, running it through a function, and then saving all of the variables, all of the weights, all of the biases that correspond to the output. While you're training, you're going to be producing a ton of files that have a ton of information in them. These files are called checkpoints usually, and those checkpoints are the weights and biases of the model at a given point in time. I find that checkpoints are anywhere from 1 gigabyte to 5 gigabytes, but you are producing a lot of data, so you want 500 gigabytes. Just leave it at that, trust me. RAM. You want however much data you're going to be processing, you need all of that data has to be on the RAM before you even get started. So if you can't handle, if the amount of RAM you have can't handle all of the data, you're not going to have enough RAM. This isn't, you're not going to be going back to the hard drive and pulling up from the hard drive to RAM. It's too slow. You want all of the data on RAM when it's time to run. And then from the RAM, it'll go to the GPU and then do some more processing. That's how you want to do it. If anything, you want more RAM than VRAM, simply because you're also going to be running the monitor and you're going to have some other peripherals. So I'm saying 16 gigabytes of RAM. 16 gigabytes of RAM is not a lot of play. I generally go up to 35 gigabytes of RAM running a couple models at a time. DDR3, DDR6, DDR4, DDR whatever. I'm going DDR4, I believe. Yeah, so that's what I use. GPU. You want 12 gigabytes of VRAM at the minimum. Most models end up running at around 9 to 10 gigabytes of VRAM being used. And remember, the GPU is going to be handling the data, and it's going to be handling a bunch of mathematical operations, a bunch of matrix operations. So it won't take in all of the data like the RAM will. The RAM's going to hold all the data. Then chunks of that data are going to get sent to the GPU, but then the GPU has to do calculations on that data, and all of that takes up RAM. So you want to keep it, you want to keep the VRAM pretty high. And if you're buying a GPU, increasing the VRAM requires buying another GPU. And finally, for the CPU, you want at least 4 cores. Most models, most PyTorch, TensorFlow, they're doing a lot of multi-threading, and having multiple cores allows the CPU to allocate tasks more efficiently. I don't think I've heard of a CPU that has less than 4 cores. At this point, I think like 12 cores or something ridiculous. I'm doing just fine. So you want to make sure that you have all of that hardware-wise, as a minimum. This is the minimum. All right. So that's the noob's introduction. Make sure you have the hardware that you need. What I listed should be enough to get you running any of the models that I will be demonstrating working with in the future. I still have a bunch of stuff on the back burner. Starting up with classes now, been a little bit busy, but I'm going to keep posting videos. Glad people keep watching. You comment, I will respond. We can go back and forth. We learn together. We grow together. Be easy, y'all. Peace.
Yeah.